Thank you, Mr. President. This relation has been a relation for about 9 decades, and we've been working together for a long time. But today it's a very important time in our history because there is also a lot of things that we're working on in the future. We believe in the future of the United States of America. We believe in what you're doing, Mr. President, really creating a lot of good things and good foundation to create more economic growth, more business in America. And it will also your work for the world peace.
We've been listening to President Donald Trump at the White House side by side with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. An interesting, fiery at times press availability, to say for certain. The president there asked a number of questions, including about the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The president getting animated with the reporter from ABC News who asked that question, telling the reporter, stopping her as she was asking that question, that MBS knew nothing about it, saying you don't have to embarrass our guest by asking something like that, later calling that reporter insubordinate. Further, he said of Khashoggi, a lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about, whether you like him or didn't like him. Things happen. Really notable comments there from the president. Yeah,
he said that he thought the license should be taken away from ABC. And just a note, I was in the White House press corps with Mary Bruce. She has covered the White House for years. She is a fine reporter. She has a lot of experience. She is very well respected. But that was certainly a very interesting moment about Jamal Khashoggi and the question that she asked about him to the Crown Prince. This, we should note, the CIA's assessment was that MBS was likely involved in that. Let's listen.
As far as this gentleman is concerned, he's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
President Trump also criticized former President Joe Biden for giving MBS a fist bump at one point during his presidency. The president, in a notable statement for the choice of words, saying, quote, "I don't give a hell where that hand has been. I give him a handshake." He also answered questions about Saudi Arabia possibly signing on to the Abraham Accords, as well as a sizable investment of up to $1 trillion that MBS has vowed to make in the United States. Let's go live to the White House now and CNN's Kristen Holmes. Kristen, what stood out to you from this meeting?
I mean, that moment about the White House reporter Jamal Khashoggi was stunning. Just a reminder of what happened at the time. Not only did U.S. intelligence find that it was likely that the Crown Prince, who was sitting there next to President Trump, ordered or directed these agents to kill Khashoggi, this led to widespread backlash across the entire world. We saw businesses limiting the deals that they were doing with Saudi Arabia, limiting the work they were doing in that country. We saw other countries pulling away from Saudi Arabia. In fact, the Crown Prince had already been to the White House at that time. It's 2018. He had been there to see President Trump. He was not invited back at any time, seemingly because of this murder and this link that the U.S. intelligence community had made. Now you have President Trump saying that he knew nothing about it. The prince knew nothing about it. Also saying he's an incredible man. I'm proud of the job he's done. I'm proud of his record on human rights in particular. And then going on to almost blame this victim of a murder by saying that he was a controversial figure. And then, of course, as you noted, quote unquote, things happen. Again, just a reminder that Jamal Khashoggi was murdered. So it appears that that is what he is referring to when he says, quote, things happen. Now, a lot came up in this conversation, in this question and answer period. We also heard President Trump downplaying any conflict of interest when it comes to Trump Organization doing business with Saudi Arabia and many of the other Gulf countries. We know that is something we have seen them building golf courses and hotels. He downplayed any kind of involvement that he has with that. Take a listen to this.
I have nothing to do with the family business. I have left, and when I've devoted 100% of my energy. What my family does is fine. They do business all over. They've done very little with Saudi Arabia, actually. I'm sure they could do a lot. And anything they've done has been very good. That's what we've done. We've built a tremendous business for a long time. I've been very successful. I decided to leave that success behind and make America very successful.
And now he also got visibly angry when that same reporter from ABC started asking questions about the Epstein files, particularly asking why he wouldn't just release them. If he's asking the Republicans to vote it, saying he supports this vote to release the files, why wouldn't President Trump just release them? That is when you started hearing President Trump really berate this reporter, something that many of us in the press corps have grown accustomed to when you are asking a question that President Trump himself doesn't like. And as we know, the situation with Epstein, the controversy, the files, is something that has really plagued President Trump's second term, and that was clearly on display as he grew increasingly irate at that series of questioning.
Yeah, he said things happen. They certainly do when the Crown Prince orders a murder, which was the finding of the American intelligence community, which is a finding that President Trump is undercutting. That was actually a question directed at the Crown Prince. He did note, he said that killing had been investigated, and he called it a painful and huge mistake. We should note, as part of that investigation, which certainly did not have the same findings as those in the U.S., there were a number of death penalties that Khashoggi's children actually spared the guilty of. But nonetheless, that moment, that key moment aside here, this is obviously a crucial meeting, the first time in 7 years. What else are we expecting to see from it today?
Well, we heard President Trump talking about this. There's going to be a number of deals that they are expected to come out of this. Remember, one of the things President Trump has talked extensively about is trying to get investments from these Gulf countries, particularly Saudi Arabia. For example, one of the things we know is that the Crown Prince had pledged $600 billion. Today, he says that number is up to $1 trillion in investments in the United States. Things he listed were AI, technology, different materials. We know that the United States is planning on selling these F-35 stealth jets to Saudi Arabia. This is something that has really caused concern among many in the Middle East. This would change the entire military landscape. As of now, the only known country to have these stealth weapons is Israel. So that is something that, including Israel, among the countries that have expressed some concern about this sale, about President Trump's willingness to give these weapons over. This relationship is incredibly important to the president. I mean, one thing to note, this visit that President Trump did, his very first trip he did overseas, was to Saudi Arabia and to the various Gulf Arab countries. He has been trying to maintain a relationship, trying to get them to invest in America. And clearly there, he was really laying that praise on thick. He continued to say how proud he was of him, what a good friend he was, how they agree with each other on every issue. They've essentially been in lockstep. Again, going back to what we just discussed with the murder of the reporter, Jamal Khashoggi, that casts a different light on all of this. But this 7 years later, any darkness of that incident, at least when it comes to this White House and this president, doesn't seem to exist anymore.
Yeah, especially when he vows a second visit before he leaves office and when that ballroom that's being constructed is open. Kristen Holmes, live for us at the White House. Thank you so much.